Hello and welcome back to our channel. Today we're going to go through something that we've been getting asked a lot about. Knowing that our house was 30K, a lot of people have been wondering, like, how did we find it? What was the process? So I thought I'd come on here and kind of go through it with you. Now, before I start though, this is what I want you to think about. One is everyone's situation is different. So for example, what we might think is cheap might not be cheap for everyone, or what we think is, renovatable and in good standards might not be right for everyone. So keep that in mind. It is a very personal experience. We're just going to go through some general things that we did, and it is from our personal point of view. Definitely might not be the same situation depending on where you are, where you want to go, and all the rest of it. Remember, take everything I say with a grain of salt. Really think about what's right for you. Okay, so the first thing we did is we went through different websites and familiarized ourselves with what it would be like to buy a house and what the websites are that list houses in Spain. So for us, Idealista we found to be by far the most thorough. And even if we found houses listed on somewhere else, on Idealista, it was there as well. So it's just one of those things that, like, if you are from Australia, like us, we have realestate.com and Domain. We prefer Domain just because it's got a few more features. But like I said, Idealista is very much comparable to that, or at least the version that they have here. So going into Idealista, you're going to make an account. You're going to want to make an account, especially if you are serious about purchasing. You want to make an account because of the alerts. Now, there's going to be so many filters to go through, and I'll get into that in a sec. But the most important thing is make an account and make sure that your alerts are on, because this is going to be the best way to get that information as soon as it's published, instead of waiting and then doing a whole search over and over again. Now, in saying your searches, so what you'll see is so many different filters for what you're purchasing. We personally, when we're looking through areas, there's an option to kind of draw an outline of where we're thinking of living. One of the early things we realized is where we wanted to be situated was going to be near either Malaga Airport or Alicante Airport. Alicante, I'm not too sure how to pronounce it, but those are the two major airports. And what that means is the tickets in and out are so much cheaper than anywhere else. They're cheaper than Madrid, they're cheaper than Barcelona, all the rest of it. So I would 100% recommend looking in those areas if you're looking for a suggestion. Of course, if you want to be in the north of Spain, different story. You're not going to be near those areas. But that's just our personal preference. Because we want to like set this house up to be our kind of hub to come back to and always have a shelter, but we want to spend majority of our time traveling. That was super important to us. And this is an hour and 15 minutes from Malaga Airport. But for us, being from Australia, a lot of people live an hour away from the airport and it's just like common. So it's not a big deal for us. It might be a big deal for you. Anyway, going back to the Idealista filters, we were circling different areas, and that's kind of how we familiarize ourselves with the different areas that there are. And then if we find a house that we were interested in, we would do a bit more research about the area, how accessible it is, and all the rest of it. So that is something definitely to keep in mind. Once you've looked at an area, we had a few running all at the same time, but once you've got your bubble mapped out, the next thing you want to do is use the filters, but use them with caution. And why I say that is, for example, one of the filters is has parking. And our house, for example, didn't show on the listing that it had parking. And because the real estate agents in Spain don't have to be qualified, what ends up happening is they don't go through a structural process of knowing exactly how to create a listing and what the best way to do that is. So if you say, for example, limit your search to something that has parking, you might not see the ones that just don't happen to be listed with parking. So don't over filter your searches. Maybe if you want a 3-bedroom house, write that you want a 2-bedroom house, because sometimes as well, some bedrooms are considered like a living room, but really, like, you could see it's a bedroom. So keep that in mind. Don't over filter. 100%. That is probably one of my biggest tips when it comes to searching properties. Another thing is price range. So something you got to think about when you buy a house in Spain, generally speaking, you want to have in your mind that you're paying an extra 10 to 15% on top of that for all the paperwork, all the real estate fees, all the, all these different fees, your lawyer, blah, blah, blah. So that's generally the rule of thumb, is 10 to 15% is what you want to have on top of your budget. So keep that in mind when you're filtering prices as well. But again, don't over filter, because negotiations can be done. I have heard of a lot of stories where, for example, someone wants to buy a house, they have a lot of money, but they don't have money enough to completely pay for the house outright. And so what they'll do is they'll negotiate potentially to pay for the house, or pay for what they have, and then just have a dealing of, a payment plan that comes after. Of course, this has to be done through the lawyer, just to make sure, they're not going to just turn around and be like, oh, no, now we want more money, or whatever the case is. This has to be in your contract. But it is something that, I guess you don't find a lot of, at least in Australia, that would never get done, and it's completely out of question. So that's something that if someone is desperate to sell a house, there is room for negotiation for sure. And we'll talk more on that a bit later, and I'll tell you a bit more about my certain experience with that. The other thing about filtering on Idealista is what houses are called. So there's different types of buildings, but again, sometimes they're listed in the wrong category. So it's very important to just step away from those filters. I know as an avid online shopper, I love my filters, but it's something that you've got to adjust to, and you've got to spend a bit more time just combing through the listings, because at the end of the day, they're not all going to show in the specific categories that you would filter out. So yeah, you might be looking for a rural house, but then you'll see houses that are in town, or vice versa, or whatever the case may be. So just keep that in mind as well. Now, once you've done that on Idealista and you've got your filters, you've got your areas locked in, save those searches and set alerts on those searches. So that's the nice thing that you can do, is you can name your searches. Say, for example, we were like, oh, looking around Valencia. So our search was, this is the Valencia search. We don't want it to exceed this price. We want it to be sort of in these areas. All of that, just make sure you put those alerts on. And then every night you'll get kind of like a summary of all the houses that are listed in that search. So this might not specifically just be for Idealista. It could be on any website, but there is a lot of missing information. At least that's what we found in our experience. So our house, if you've seen our walkthrough, I talk you through all the things that weren't listed on the listing itself. And some people turn around and say, oh, just make sure that it's listed in with the council or whatnot. And it is part of the council house. So for example, our garage, that is in the, I never know how to pronounce these things, but it's like cadastry or something like that. Anyway, but it's like the paperwork that has what, according to your council, you actually own, like your property outline or your lot size or whatever you want to call it. So just keep that in mind. So definitely ask the questions. Don't be afraid to ask the questions. If you see something, you might not want to do it to every single house you see, but if you see something and you're like, this would be perfect if it just had a garage or an extra room or whatever the case may be, definitely ask the question and don't go into it thinking, oh no, the listing doesn't have it, so it doesn't have it. Ask. Another thing is that sometimes you'll see a house that's listed and then you'll keep scrolling and you'll see it again. And you'll be like, oh, have they just relisted it so it comes up higher? No, In Spain, it is very common to have a house listed with multiple agents. That's just completely fine. So they'll kind of compete for the sale. And yeah, as an owner, if you're selling a house, you can reach out to multiple agents and just see who sells it for you first. So that's completely okay too. So I personally, when we did see that, contacted all the agents because different agencies also have different fees. So some might take a bigger chunk. And speaking of fees, what tends to happen is the price of the house sometimes has half of the fee in it. So say for example, a house is like $50,000, they'll list it for, $52,000 because it'll have half the agent's fee, and then the rest you'll pay straight directly to the agent. So that kind of covers the seller. So like the actual property owner doesn't have to fork out that extra money. It's kind of frowned upon, as far as I've heard, it's frowned upon, but it does happen, and that's a lot of the time what happens. So sometimes you'll go to one agent and it'll come across like they're charging near nothing to, as commission to sell the house. And then the next agent is charging an arm and a leg, but that's because they haven't put the price inside of the house price itself. And you'll be able to gauge this by how willing they are to negotiate the price itself. If they turn around, which we've had a few times, where they've gone, nope, no negotiation, this is just the price, that's it. And they play hardball like that, then yeah, it's likely that they've encompassed a lot of the fees that's associated inside of the house price, and that's why it's like that. The next thing we want to talk about is WhatsApp. So in Spain, WhatsApp is a universal means of communication, even more so than emails. So even professionals, everyone communicates through WhatsApp, but we're talking even phone companies, you can contact them through WhatsApp. It's a very common thing, and it might actually be a European thing, but we've definitely noticed it in Spain. In Australia, email is like how you get someone to take you seriously, whereas in Spain, WhatsApp is the way to go. So in saying that, some listings may not have a phone number. And if you are contacting from an outside, just make sure to put the area code of Spain and then the mobile number. So all mobile numbers in Spain start with 6. So that's how you know it's a mobile number and not a landline number. And once you've got that number, you can put it in your WhatsApp, and only the phone allows you to search it. If you do it on the web app, then it doesn't let you search a person that you haven't previously contacted. So that's a little tidbit. But yes, so try and get their mobile number. And a lot of the time, if the listing doesn't have the mobile number, try to find out what real estate agency it is, which is a lot of the time it's listed there. And then you can go ahead and go to their website, and probably there will be a WhatsApp phone number there. Another thing I will say is Idealista has a function to obviously message and contact agents, but a lot of them don't contact you back through there. So if you're, like, why is no one contacting me? That's likely the case. Not a lot of them check that. So definitely try and get their mobile number and contact them through WhatsApp, because I've found time and time again that's the quickest way to get a response. Now, this might be something that you don't need to do. We needed to do it because we were buying the house virtually before we even arrived. However, in saying that, I feel like now that I'm here, even if I was purchasing another house, I would probably still do this, just because number one, it's convenient. Number two, houses are, at least this type that we're looking for, aren't like all in one district, and they're quite like, far away from each other. So I would 100% recommend that if that's your situation, but it's asking for a video. Now, some listings have videos, but it is a rarity. And they bother with videos when you're purchasing a more expensive house. So again, this might be something I'm only speaking of because we are looking for more affordable housing, like cheaper houses that we would then renovate. So in our case, definitely asking for a video was really helpful. Specifically asking them if you've noticed the photos and you're like, I think that's a hairline fracture crack in the wall, I want to check that out. something like that, you can ask the agent to specifically get a recording of that. I mean, it's not going to be as good as having a building inspector, which is my next point. Definitely get a building inspector out. We didn't, but our actions are very unorthodox. We don't do anything the normal way. We're a bit weird like that. But if you can afford it and you're just like 100%, I will get a building inspector out, then yeah, do that. So anyway, going back to the video, ask for it, ask for the specific things you want to see in the property, really clue yourself in through the photos, and then from that you can know what to request in the video. And a walkthrough is really helpful. It kind of makes you feel like the dimensions of the property more than a photo. And also ask them to record it in, if they're using an iPhone, for example, just your normal lens, the standard lens, and not a wide angle lens, because a wide angle lens will make everything look bigger. But you know, I've got a background in photography, so those things matter for me. But it's good to know. So the next thing was that inspectors, getting an inspector out. So these are some things you might want to consider, is a like a termite inspector, because some houses have like wood in the roofs and things like that have been there for ages, and they might have termites. There's obviously a building inspector that will also check for fractures, water leaks, burst pipes, things like that, that you want to know the structure of the house is solid and you're building on a solid foundation. Well, not building, but renovating at least. So you want to know those core things are okay. That leads me on to our next point. There are certain things that you've got to keep in mind when purchasing a house in Spain. And it's three main things. One is your roof. If your roof is not up to scratch, you're going to have issues. So a lot of older houses might have issues with their roofing, and what you want to think about is, you know, is there mold? Is it considered inhabitable by the council? Certain things like that that are going to prevent you from being able to, you know, just move in, start renovating, blah, blah, blah. Two is your electric situation. So Spain is phasing out old electric work and they're bringing in the new, because obviously for safety purposes, and it's, you know, 2025 now. I was going to say 2024, but it's a new year. Happy New Year. But yeah, so definitely make sure that that is something that has either already been done, or get a quote for how much it's going to cost you, so you could at least budget for it before you move in, because the local council won't actually supply you with any electricity unless the I guess standards are up to scratch. So again, this is just, I'm not a builder. You know, there's a lot of words that I might not know, but this is just based on experience. And so I don't know the technical terms of things, but bear with me and I hope it helps anyway. So yes, so electricity, make sure that, you know, there's like the box, the electric box, with all the switches, you know, the fuses. I don't know what they're called exactly, but those things. So you will need that before you move in, because as soon as you switch your power over into your name, that's when they go, okay, well, has it been redone, and is it up to scratch? Then we have the last thing, as far as I know, again, there might be more, but the last thing is your plumbing. Again, same thing. You might not be able to get water running. And yeah, so it's obviously a bit different if you are looking for a house to be off grid and you know how to plumb things and you know how to, you know, electrify things and you know how to do all that, and you're looking for actually get, you know, for example, solar power and things like that. So definitely keep that in mind. It's a different situation, but we don't know how to use a compost toilet and all the rest of it. So we definitely wanted to be connected to the mains, connected to the electricity, and for that to be legal and have the roof secure, and, you know, renovated. So that's another thing that I'll go back to. That for one of the first points that I mentioned is that none of that was listed in the property. And you'd think like as a real estate agent, it's like, no, people are looking for this. I want to list that, that it's got new electric work, new plumbing, new roof, new all this. But none of that was listed, and we only found out after inquiring. And I totally get in the sense that this house is a cheap house and it's probably not very worthwhile for the real estate agent, but you are still selling a house. So you'd think that these things would be listed. But anyway, that's the situation. Now, once you've kind of searched a house, and I wouldn't say once you've searched a house, I would probably kind of get this person on board before I even start looking now if I was to do it all over again, but I really didn't know what I was doing. We knew we wanted to move to Spain and buy a house. That's all we knew. And we had never even purchased a house in Australia. So we hadn't even gone through the process in our home country, let alone in a new country. But I would recommend finding a lawyer that you trust. For us, we used a lawyer and she was fine. But now in hindsight, we've met a few people that are great at what they do. So personally, I would use Just Law. They're actually the people who run the Move to Spain podcast and Facebook group. Now, they're a bunch of lawyers. John is the head of that. And I feel like I'm like doing a little sales pitch, but really like they know what they're doing. And what helps as well is because this video is probably going to be useful for people who are moving internationally. So they speak English. So they all speak English, which is really helpful, especially when you're talking to a lawyer. Like translating everything isn't easy. And there are a lot of lawyers that do speak English. But the other thing that helps is, I've mentioned this in a previous video, is that when we were trying to do this, it was August, so no one was working. So like no one was working. No one likes to work during the hottest month of the year, which is totally fair enough. But Just Law does work throughout those months, and they don't really stop because they've got so many agents. It's not like a one man, band. So it's something that if we were doing it again and in the future when we are looking to buy another property, which fingers crossed that happens for us, we would definitely go through Just Law, that's for sure. But yeah, anyway, I'm sure you'll find your way regardless. But yeah, you need a lawyer because at the end of the day, like I said, there is no qualifications for real estate agents. There's no, governing body. There's no, so just cover yourself. Make sure that, the lawyer's checking everything. The other thing that a lawyer can do, but we did it ourselves again because we didn't know what the hell we were doing, was checking the legal status of a house. So because we were out of the country, it was not going to be possible for us to do it. And if we had known the lawyer can do this, we would have got it done through them. But this was early days, and we needed the Nota Simple. So the Nota Simple is, I don't know how they pronounce it in Spanish, but it like literally reads out Nota Simple. That is a document that is going to be so important. And like I said, I've mentioned this in another video, but the house can be encumbered. So what I mean by that is that, there's a loan on it. And in Spain, when you're purchasing a house, if someone has a loan on the house, the new purchaser, the new buyer, it will then be accountable for that loan. So it's not on the person and the individual, it's actually on the house itself. So you're picking up all the debt that that house has. Unpaid bills like water bills, electricity bills, all that is the same situation. It's on the house and not the person that lives there. So that you want to make sure that it doesn't have any encumbrances. You also want to make sure that the house is legally built. So for example, our house is for the most part legally built, but there are certain areas of the house that are renovated that were never registered as changes to the house. For the most part, it has been, but just to be safe, we wanted everything just ticked off. We wanted it to be perfect. We didn't want to run into any trouble, especially this isn't our home country. So it's not like, something falls apart and you just go to mums and dads while this gets sorted out. So it's something that we definitely wanted to make sure is okay. And so what we had to do in our personal experience and circumstance is that we negotiated in the contract that the house would be registered completely and all the new changes would be reported. And because that takes about 6 months, we purchased the house in August, but we've only ever paid a third of the price so far. We're still waiting because they've registered it, but it doesn't reflect, they sent us all the paperwork, the lawyer checked it through, it's all perfectly legal now, but it doesn't reflect on the Nota Simple up until March, just because it takes ages for the system to be updated. So we said to them, okay, buying the house, we'll pay you a third now. Then once we see that the Nota Simple is 100% updated, has all the correct information, then we will pay you the remainder. And we did that through our lawyer, and there were negotiations back and forth, and the owner luckily was completely fine with it. They were like, yep, that's no problem. Right now it is technically in legal status, but the extra just precautionary measure is that it should be updated on the Nota Simple, and we won't hand over the rest of that money until that happens. The other thing that we negotiated, again, negotiations is so important, is that we wanted to make sure that we can move as soon as we arrived. We didn't want to be homeless, so for us, we put that in the negotiations and in the contract as well, that we will be moving in, and yeah, that's our situation. So there is a lot of room for negotiations. You just got to be smart about it. Talk to your lawyer. If you've fallen in love with a property, and it's meant to be for you, at least in what we believe, if it's meant to be for you, it'll be. There might be a few things that you've got to iron out, but you can likely negotiate your way to your dream home. So that's always nice to think about. Now, another thing is your deposit. So this might be common knowledge. I don't know if it's just Spain. I don't know if it's just Australia. I don't know all the facts, but it's worth a mention. So once you've made an offer, you've got to put in a deposit for it. It's a certain percentage. For us, it was $3,000 to put in an offer, just so that they know that they can take you seriously and you've got the money and you're actually serious about putting in an offer. So we put in the offer and put in our negotiated rate or price for the house, and it was accepted. So that's great, but that's just something to keep in mind. So just before you go through the process of getting a home loan or getting any type of loan, whatever the case may be for you, you will need to pay upfront just to put in the offer in the first place. Now, when this deposit gets paid, if from that date you've got a certain amount of days until you get approved for your loan or not. If you get approved, the house has to go through, otherwise you owe double the deposit that you paid. But if the loan doesn't go through, and you show them that it's not my fault, the loan didn't go through, then that's fine and you get your deposit back. Now, the other thing is, from that date of the deposit, and if the owners accept and then change their mind, they owe you double the deposit. So yeah, just keep that in mind. That's a little thing that I found interesting. I was like, okay, cool. So we're kind of protected on both sides, which is nice. Or again, I don't know if this is everywhere, but it was the case with our real estate agent. And the same goes for the contract deposit. Then there's another deposit that gets paid so that you can be in contractual talks, and that deposit, once you give that, the same rules apply. So if there's a change of mind, blah blah, you're both protected. Before I let you guys go, the last thing is, this is not advice, it's just my thoughts and my experience and how I kind of see it, is a lot of people expect these bargain houses to be in a city center like Madrid or something, and it's an unrealistic expectation. If that's what you're looking for, you're likely going to be disappointed, because you can purchase houses for like $20,000, $30,000, let's say in dollars, euros, sorry, in say Malaga, in the city center of Malaga, but it's likely going to be dilapidated, falling apart, not in good stock and standard. So it's just one of those things that, like, take a step back and just be realistic. You can find a solid home like we have, but you're gonna likely have to drive a bit out of the way to live there. Now, there may be a lot of things that I haven't talked about in this video that might come to me and haunt me later. But in saying that, if there's something that I haven't mentioned that you've experienced, we would love to hear about it, because what we found on our channel is what's really helpful is, like, we'll say something just from our experience, because we don't know. We're doing this for the first time. We're new here. We don't know all the facts. But what's been really helpful is people commenting and actually letting us know extra details. And, you know, for anyone that's like watching this and they're like, oh, I want to do the same, they haven't filled me in on anything, going through the comments is really helpful. And we really, really want to thank kind of like our audience that has been so helpful and generous to like actually take the time to like list things that we had no idea about. I think that's like great signs of building a community, and we really love it and we enjoy it. It's so immersive. So yeah, that goes without saying. If you have certain advice, even if you're a lawyer and you're just like, oh my God, how dare they not mention this? Please put it in the comments, because it's useful. If it's not useful for us, that's okay. It will be useful, I guarantee, for someone else that's watching this and wants to do the same sort of thing. But besides that, that brings us to the end of the video. If you've enjoyed, we would absolutely love to hear from you. It's always nice to hear from you guys. Thanks for being here, and I hope this video has really helped you know, kind of open your eyes as to the different things you got to keep in mind. And if it didn't help, well, I'm sorry. But yeah, I'll let you guys go. Enjoy your day. Bye.